Thank you for agreeing to participate in this interview. I'm currently completing a graduate research assignment for Concord University. The purpose of this interview is to learn about your experiences using educational research in your teaching profession. With your permission, I would like to record this interview for my course assignment. Your participation is voluntary. You may choose not to answer any question or stop this interview at any time. The recording will only be viewed by my instructor for educational purposes. Do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Okay, could you introduce yourself and tell me about your current teaching position and your educational experience?
Yeah, so my name is Autumn Feldez. I'm currently a special education teacher at Princeton Senior High School. This is my 6th year teaching. The first 2 years I taught self-contained special education. The first year was an autism room. Second year was a mild to moderate room. The last 3 years I have taught in a multi-categorical classroom. So mainly 9 through 12, whatever math course that they need. Like last year it was Algebra 1 and Geometry and Biology. This upcoming year I'll have like Transitional Math, Algebra 2, Geometry. So really whatever math courses the numbers call for, that's where I am.
Thank you for sharing your background. Every educator develops their own approach to teaching over time, and many teachers draw from professional experiences, collaboration, and educational research as they continue to grow. I'd like to shift our conversation towards your experiences with educational research and how it connects to your teaching. So, what does educational research mean to you in your role as a teacher?
In my role as a teacher, I would say educational research is a tool that helps me make decisions about my teaching. So, teaching in special ed, I work with students who have a wide range of learning needs and academic abilities. So, from the autism spectrum to, kids that just may have dyslexia or issues with their working memory. Each student is different, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Educational research helps me to identify evidence-based strategies and help to differentiate for each of these kids in my classroom. So the differentiation with these different students, sometimes you get a student that you just, you've tried all the things that you know how to do. With research-based strategies, the research is always there. There's always an opportunity to go back and, try it a different way, search new strategies, and really try to break through with a student and see how we can get them working and just feeling confident about what they're learning in my classroom.
Can you describe a time when research influenced the way that you planned or taught a lesson?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just bringing some of my experience from working strictly with like autistic children or mild and moderate disabilities. A good example is task analysis. So many of my autistic kids do better when you have like a visual and everything's broken down into smaller structured steps. So I've carried that over into even the high school multi-categorical world because I do have autistic students in those classes, but even the kids that are not autistic, they just work better when the steps seem small and manageable. And so research supports, and I have seen that firsthand, how it reduces anxiety. Like if I give an assignment and I'm like, we're going to do 20 questions, we're going to do 1 and 2 step equations, let's get started. Like that's just going to flip a lot of kids out. So, if I say we're going to do 1 through 5, we're going to do 1 step equations, let's see how we do. If I break it down, it just really reduces the anxiety and makes them more comfortable and confident in what they're learning.
How do you usually stay informed about new educational research or instructional practices?
So our county actually has a new teacher mentor program, and I served on that last year. And this is where like first year teachers and long-term subs can basically just get their foot in the door with how the county runs just their systems, such as like emails, Weavis, things like that, but also just helping them with teaching strategies. And so once a month we would meet and we would have professional developments with research-based instructional strategies such as classroom management, student engagement, and basically just practical skills that new teachers would need. And being a mentor really helped me stay up to date because I needed new and fresh information to help keep them in their, new teacher high, as I guess you could say. But given the guidance that was based on research and proven practices just really seemed to help them and make them more confident in their teaching abilities.
Can you describe a research based strategy that had a meaningful impact on your classroom?
So I think the biggest impact in my classroom has been building strong relationships with my students. I found that when students know that they're supported and they feel comfortable in the classroom, they're much more willing to participate and ask questions and just take risks with their learning. I really try to create an environment where making mistakes is part of the learning process and not just something to be afraid of or embarrassed by. And so by the time they get to high school, like most of my students hate math. They already know, they're like, I'm not good at math. They already just completely want to shut me out. But I actually had a Algebra 2 student this year that's been the story for the past 3 years. And by the end of this semester, she made a 92 on her final exam. And I was so proud because seeing that little freshman that was like, I hate math, and like she basically shut me out the whole first year in Algebra 1. But I think creating that environment in my room where it's okay to make mistakes and we're going to learn from it, I really watched her grow in her math abilities, and I was just super proud to see how confident she became in her math abilities.
How do you determine whether a new instructional strategy is effective for your students?
So I think just looking at the whole picture, of course I pay attention to things like formative assessments and classwork, and if students are meeting their IEP goals, but I also see how they're engaging in the classroom. Are they participating more or less? Are they more independent? Are they more confident than a few weeks ago? And those things matter just as much, in my opinion. I also think asking students for feedback is important because oftentimes if they can tell me what's happening and or the barrier, why they're not understanding or why that instructional strategy just didn't work for them, it just didn't click, that's also super helpful because if the kids are enjoying how they're learning, they're going to just enjoy the journey more. They're not going to shut you out and just be like, well, I hate to watch a video, so I'm just going to tune it out and not watch it. But every student is different and every class has its own needs. So I think just trying to be flexible and just listening to your kids is one of the most important parts of being a special education teacher.
So what challenges have you experienced or faced when trying to apply research in your classroom?
One of the biggest challenges, I think, is meeting such a wide range of needs all at the same time. So in my classrooms, I never have more than 12 students, but the range of learning capabilities can be super wide. So in a multi-categorical special education classroom, it's not unusual to be teaching multiple subjects or supporting students with different disabilities. For example, I had one class period where it was 6 students taking geometry and the other 6 taking Algebra 1. So you really have to get creative in how you're just presenting instruction to 2 different subjects and how you're differentiating the needs of the students as well. So I would say research gives me a strong foundation on figuring out how to apply these strategies and how to differentiate all these different needs. It can definitely be a balancing act, but it's also one of the most rewarding parts of the job, just helping each of these students receive the instruction that they need in some of the most challenging environments.
Thinking about everything that we've discussed so far, I'd like to finish by reflecting on your growth as an educator. How has your understanding of teaching changed over the course of your career?
I would say one of the biggest things that's changed my perspective is early on I was so focused on teaching a lesson and following the steps, hitting the standards, doing all the things. But now I'm much more focused on teaching the student. In special education, we're not always going to hit the standards. Sometimes you got to back up, even before if the kids are not at standard one, sometimes you got to back up and do some prep work and get them ready for it. I feel that when students are feeling that they're valued and supported, they're much more open to learning, and I've stated that earlier on. But the content is still important, but the relationships that you build will make them more likely to come and ask for help, not just shut you out. And I think the classroom environment that you create is really what makes learning possible in a special education classroom.
So, what advice would you give a new teacher about using educational research in everyday practice?
I think my biggest piece of advice would be not to feel like you have to use every new strategy you learn about. You come out of college and you've learned so many strategies, and they're all great, but sometimes they just don't work for specific students, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to really just dig deep, research some different stuff, to try to make that connection with that kid. Educational research obviously is a toolbox and not a checklist. Always in the new teacher mentor program, that's one of the things I would tell them. So because every kid in every classroom is different, you can't be afraid to try new things. It's good to have those, like your checklist and your toolbox to pull from, but it's okay to try new things and to, jump out there and research new stuff. So to me, the goal isn't to use all the research-based strategies, but it's to find the ones that help your students to learn and be successful the most.
So, is there anything else about educational research and teaching that you think is important for future educators to understand?
Yeah, I think educational research gives you a great starting point, but it doesn't replace getting to know your students and building that relationship. So, as I've said many times, every class, every student is different. So, you have to be willing to adapt and make changes along the way, even if it's uncomfortable or even if it's something that you've never done before. You just have to take that leap of faith. The best teachers, I think, are always learning, and not just from research, but from your experience, and just from collaborating with other colleagues and, hearing their experiences. Sometimes veteran teachers can give really good advice, and, it might be something you've never even thought about, but you're like, oh, hey, that might work, and sometimes it does. So every year teaches you something new, and I think that's what keeps you growing as an educator.